Mathematics 3. Comparing mass of an object. Quarter 2, Week 1. Day 1. At the end of the lesson, the learner should be able to compare the mass of objects directly and compare the mass of objects indirectly. Mass is the amount of material an object has. It tells us how heavy or light the object is. Lighter means less mass and heavier means more mass. We can hold each object in our hands to get a sense of which one is heavier or lighter. Mass and weight are often used interchangeably, but they refer to different concepts. Mass is the amount of matter in an object. Weight is the amount of force exerted by gravity on that object. Mass is the same wherever you are. For example, the mass of an object is the same on Earth and the Moon. Weight can change depending on where you are. For example, your weight on Earth will be different from your weight on the Moon due to the difference in gravitational force. Hefting involves holding each object in your hands to compare their masses. This way, you can get a sense of which one is heavier or lighter based on how they feel. The ball is heavier than the paper. The paper is lighter than the ball. Pair 2. The book is heavier than the envelope. The envelope is lighter than the book. Pair 3. The mug is heavier than the paper cup. The paper cup is lighter than the mug. For pairs 1, 2, and 3, emphasize that these pairs of objects have a noticeable difference in their masses, and sometimes they are easy to compare even without hefting. Pair 4. The mug is heavier than the box. The box is lighter than the mug. Pair 5. The toy is heavier than the balloon. The balloon is lighter than the toy. Pair 6. Bottle B is heavier than bottle A. Bottle A is lighter than bottle B. For pairs 4, 5, and 6, emphasize that bigger objects may be lighter than smaller ones. Many people assume that a bigger object is always heavier, but this is a common misconception. It is important to address this, as the mass of an object is independent of its size. Pair 7. The notebook is heavier than the pad paper. The pad paper is lighter than the notebook. Pair 8. The marker pen is heavier than the ball pen. The ball pen is lighter than the marker pen. For pairs 7 and 8, emphasize that it can sometimes be difficult to tell which object is heavier or lighter by hefting, especially when there is a small difference in their masses. We can use a device to help us decide. A balance scale is a tool that can be used to compare the mass of two objects. If the hanger tips to one side, the object on that side is heavier, or we can say that if one side is lower, the object on that side is heavier. Alternatively, we can say that the object on the higher side is lighter. What if the hanger stays balanced? It means the objects weigh the same or have the same mass. Direct comparison, weighing two objects directly against each other. Indirect comparison uses a known reference object to determine how heavy or light other objects are. Two stores sell lunchboxes that you like, but you want something light enough to carry in your bag. How can you determine which one is lighter if you cannot compare them directly? We can compare the mass of the two lunchboxes by using a third object, such as a small bottle of glue. This method is called indirect comparison. Have them compare the mass of objects using the reference object. Steps 1. Weigh object 1 against the reference object. Lunchbox A and glue. The bottle of glue is heavier than lunchbox A, or lunchbox A is lighter than the bottle of glue. Two. Weigh object 2 against the reference object, lunchbox B and glue. The bottle of glue is lighter than lunchbox B, or lunchbox B is heavier than the bottle of glue. So, which is lighter, lunchbox A or lunchbox B? Why? Lunchbox A is lighter than lunchbox B. Explanation: lunchbox A is lighter than the bottle of glue. But the bottle of glue is lighter than lunchbox B. Thus, lunchbox A is lighter than lunchbox B. How do we arrange these objects from heaviest to lightest? What would the arrangement be? The mug is heavier than the ball. The ball is lighter than the mug. The ball is heavier than the paper cup. The paper cup is lighter than the ball. Based on these results, how do we arrange the mug, ball, and paper cup from heaviest to lightest? Paper cup, lightest. Ball, mug, heaviest. Generalizations. How would you compare the mass of two objects directly? You can compare their mass by hefting or using a balancing scale. How would you compare the mass of two objects indirectly? You can compare the mass of two objects using a third object as the basis of comparison. To compare two objects indirectly, first, compare each object with the reference object to measure their mass. Then, use these comparisons to determine which object is heavier or lighter. For example, the book is heavier than the notebook. The notebook is heavier than the pad paper. Then, the book is heavier than the pad paper. How do we arrange three objects from heaviest to lightest and vice versa? First, compare the mass of two objects, A and B, and note which one is heavier, e.g. A. Next, compare the mass of the lighter object, B, with the third object, C, and note which one is heavier. One. If C is lighter than B, then the arrangement from heaviest to lightest is A, B, C. 2. If C is heavier than B, B is the lightest. Then, compare the mass of A and C and note which is heavier between the two. If A is heavier than C, the arrangement would be A, C, B. If C is heavier than A, the arrangement would be C, A, B.